It is 5:30. We might as well begin our special meeting of the Provo City Planning Commission. The microphone doesn't work. Okay. Still doesn't work. They told me it doesn't work, that's why. Anyway, so we welcome you tonight to our special meeting. Actually, is it? Yes. Well, there we go. We have one item on the agenda tonight. Before we do get to the one item on the agenda, we will begin with opening prayer by Mr. Smith, followed by a pledge of allegiance, which will be led by Mr. McKinney. Mr. Smith, please.
Our kind Father in heaven, we come before thee this night. We give thee thanks for all the many blessings which we have from thee. We give thanks for the wonderful city that we live in and those people who dedicate their time to and resources to making it what it is. We're thankful for thy watchful eye being over and blessing those who serve the city and serve us. We ask thee to continue to do that. We pray for these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Will the audience please arise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith and Mr. McKinney. We will begin with a roll call, and we will start on my right. Please state your name and whether you have any conflicts of interest on the item before us this evening.
Kermit McKinney, no conflicts.
Edward Jones, no conflicts.
Ross Flum, no conflicts.
Brian Smith, no conflicts.
Maria Winden, no conflicts.
Thank you very much. The first item and only item tonight, excuse me, is the JZW Architects requests a project plan approval for the final phase of the arbors on the avenue located at 5072 North University Avenue in the Pro 10 or Pro A10 zone in the River Bottoms neighborhood. We'll first hear from Mr. Maxfield and then hear from the developer after that. Mr. Maxfield.
Thank you. This item or phase of the arbors on the avenue was originally approved in May of 2007. Because of economic situations, conditions, was never built. The applicants are now proposing to finish that project. However, there are some design changes in the project since that time, and that's really what the review and approval is about. As you can see it on the map, this is whoops. You know not to push certain buttons on the pointer. I hope I did the wrong one again, didn't I?
Just push that side to advance it.
Oh, he's doing the laser. Apparently not. Well, imagine if you will. Need to practice more before I get here. The picture on the left where we at, oh, it's now up to us. Okay, there we go. Shows the location, the arbors on the avenue. The buildings directly to the north are phase one, buildings 1 and 2, phase 1. Those buildings each contain 25 units. The proposed site here would have 68 units. That is a change from the original approval. There was an amended development agreement which was executed last, or at least approved last December, I believe, last December, January, somewhere in that time. They've been working on the project. It's gotten to this point now where, as you recall, we had a delay because of the development agreement that it needed to be executed between the existing HOA and this project because there's overlapping parking on the site. This shows kind of the parking layout as it exists. You can see on the left, the building there is the clubhouse area. There's surface parking in that area. It's about 36 spaces. Then you have underground parking through there, which they've actually looked at and found some extra spaces, my understanding. So they have about 90 spaces in that underground area now. And then the parking, which is with the proposed phase 2. Up on the upper left, you can see an area 2. That's an area that they're looking at possibly adding as an amenity. We're not really asking for your approval because we haven't really reviewed it for meeting the engineering standards and other things, but my understanding would be kind of climate controlled garages, it could be accessed for certain residents that way. But that would be a review and perhaps, in your approval, even including something that CRC approval could review that and go forward with it if you felt comfortable. That would also be subject to existing development agreements and HOA agreements too. We'd have to check those. But stepping aside from that one, with the spaces from the next to the amenity, the 36 spaces on the north to your left, the 90 underground, and then the other spaces which are there on the right, and I believe it's somewhere around 125 if I'm not mistaken. It totals over the 266 that would be required for the site. The site requires 2.25 per the new development agreement. The zone, the pro zone for the site already says 2.25, but the previous development agreement had gone up to 2.6. That's now been reduced back to 2.25. So 266 is a required number. They have somewhere around 270 right now, not including the ones up on Canyon Road. And so with that was one of the things that staff had the concerns about before, where until that HOA agreement with the HOA was concluded, we weren't sure they could park anything off-site. Now with that, then really we can look at the parking for the whole project rather than just, particular to the boundaries of phase 2. So with that, we can conclude that there's sufficient parking on the site. The remaining, and this shows kind of the underground parking, which shows the details where they've reallocated. There are a couple of areas on here which we'll have to look at. Perhaps one's a breaking with the landscaping, because we have the 10 spaces before you have to have a break, because that's just done in this area, and then possibly one that's an exit. And that's not necessarily a space, but it may be an area between the spaces. So those are things we as a CRC will have to look at and approve in the fine detail of the site. But again, even addressing that's not threatening the required number of parking spaces. And then the architectural renderings was the other point that was part of your review. This is the existing architecture that was approved through the project, and then the buildings as they now appear. And then this is the proposed architecture, which has the same balcony trims, the same colors, the same basic layout. The difference, if you notice, and go back, is the more rectangular shape of this building now compared to kind of what you can see on the far gray outline, where it had a little bit more feature to it that way. There's really nothing in the development agreement, anything we can see that locks that shape into place, but it does really address the architectural elements. And we feel their proposal has sufficiently addressed those areas. And those are the two main reviews. The other, we do have the plans for the dumpster treatment. This was the dumpster treatment that was approved through a conditional use permit back in 2005 or 6, I believe. And they've committed to do the same treatment on this dumpster location. And so you kind of have a more solid wall and a little bit heavier treatment. They've also submitted a landscaping plan, which pretty much extends the current landscaping on the site over to it. In fact, probably even has a little bit more abundance of trees than maybe what the existing project to the north has. And I guess with that, we'll just ask if there are any questions, staff.
Thank you, Mr. Maxfield. Mr. Smith?
Thank you. Can you go back to the overhead? I just wanted to see where that dumpster location actually is. It looked like I could see it kind of down in the southwest corner. Is that all right?
There is some, I guess, discussion we'd have, because you look at the convenience of this one and this one, they're on the edges, and to see if there is some location, that would be between buildings or something, if that'd be beneficial to the site, but this at least meets the minimum standard.
Thank you. Other questions for staff or members of the planning commission? Seeing none, we would invite the applicant to come forward and add to anything that Mr. Maxfield has stated or to clarify anything. Please. And again, state your name for the record.
Hi, my name is Caleb Larson. I'm representing JZW Architects here today. Just like to thank you guys again for, well, I guess, sorry.
Are you, Alyssa, are you getting him?
Can you get it a little closer? How's that?
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. So, yeah, again, I'd like to thank you guys for letting us do this special meeting. We really appreciate the time it takes to pull something like this together. We spent a lot of time and effort in making this second phase as an extension of the first and keeping the cohesive theme, similar elements, the same quality of materials, colors, things like that. And we feel strongly that it's going to be a good addition to the area that takes care of a, problem where it's just sort of a hole in the ground right now. I know we'd all like to see something nice there, and we believe that it's going to add a lot of value to the neighborhood. So, thanks again for letting us present here tonight. And you guys have anything to add?
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Yes, Mr. McKinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The transition from the underground parking in the center building to the new structure, what will that look like? Is there going to be a brick wall that will help increase that elevation? How do we make that transition smooth and clean?
Yeah, and that is something that we're working out right now. We're looking at a treatment that's going to be a mixture of the similar materials with a rock wainscot that's going to match the rest of the building. We've looked at some stucco options as well for that area. But it would be materials that would match and be cohesive. We're going to try to minimize the impact of that. As it is right now, it's more of just a big stucco wall with rebar sticking out. I'm sure you guys know, and we definitely don't want it to. We want it to look attractive and look a little more intentional, which is what the idea is.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. Is there a neighborhood chair that's present that would like to speak and to be heard on this issue? Again, please state your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Dave Rosen. I'm the newly elected neighborhood chair for the area, and I have been in discussion with Ben Markham over this project, and we chose not to hold an additional neighborhood meeting. The one that was held originally, the neighborhood was generally in favor of that, and our main concerns were, did the developer work out any issues and concerns with the current HOA of the current facility? And it's our understanding that those have been worked out, and thus we have no real concerns about the project.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any members of the neighborhood community that would like to speak or to be heard on this issue? If so, please come forward or yell from there.
General public too?
Yep. And again, state your name, sir. Thank you.
My name is Mike Rohn, and I'm talking as a general citizen, even though I'm a neighborhood chair and the area representative for this northern part of Provo. I think that adding some additional housing in the north part of Provo and improving the whole so that we have something that fits in is a great addition to our city and this gateway, this entryway into our city. I think that's extremely positive. And I think it will help support the businesses that are located there, particularly the shopping area. And not only that, when I drive through the business park, I see just hundreds and hundreds of cars parked there. And I've seen a number of our businesses relocate elsewhere. And I think that having local housing will attract young, employable people to live there, to work there. It will also generate, I think, a supermarket-type complex that will help provide food and create kind of a living environment that will be attractive to have people move to northern Provo and then to stay there as they initiate families. I've met with the developer numerous times over the past 6 months in conjunction with this project. And the only real concern I had as a person who currently is somewhat hobbled by a walking device is the location of the handicap parking and the ease of access adjacent to entryways. And I noticed that the parking here in the front of the building is not covered where the handicap parking spots are. I assume there's an entrance right there. I couldn't tell from the plans. On the side, there are a couple of handicap parkings under the covered area. I would just encourage them to accommodate those of us who find pedestrian mobility a challenge, and particularly when weather's like it is now and it's slippery and wet and icy, to grant some additional concessions in that regard. Other than that, I think this is an excellent project and will be a great addition to our northern city.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Other members of the community that would like to speak or to address the item before us? Not seeing an overwhelming rush. We will close the public comment at this time and return the discussion to the members of the Planning Commission, at which point, or after which discussion, we will need to make a recommendation to the City Council on this item. Commissioners, questions, comments, things you'd like to discuss? Mr. Jones, sorry, Ed.
Sorry, I should have asked this when the developer was at the podium. Can you briefly describe the kind of units that will be in this development? I mean, are they studio apartments for bachelors or families? What kind of?
There's a good mix. We don't have any studios. It's a good mix of everywhere from one bedrooms to the larger, 3 bedroom penthouses. The whole upper 2 levels, each level has a mezzanine above that makes it a little more of a desirable, larger unit. But it is more, we're gearing toward, as was mentioned earlier, some young professionals, a little more where the quality of work is going to be really high. We want these to be nice, desirable units. They're not going to be hurting for any square footage. So that's sort of the the demographic that I think it would appeal to. But overall, a good mixture of 1, 2, 3 plus dens, that sort of bedroom.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a question for city staff and/or engineering. With respect to the new ingress that will be associated with this new building, I noticed that there is some overflow parking that tends to park on University Parkway. Is there anything we can do in the city to create opportunities for us to not have obscured entrance and ingress out of the structure by, I don't know if we red curb some of those lanes, within a certain amount of footage, or what can we do to make sure we keep the traffic safe coming in and out of University?
I'm David Day with Provo City Public Works. I'm not sure, you're talking about this.
This one there, yes.
Okay. So that really doesn't change from the original plan. It'll function as well as this other one. This one has a signal, however, but we don't anticipate any problem with that. What was your concern?
I guess the concern is that with pulling out of the parking space onto University, which is going to be a fairly high speed, fairly heavy traffic patterns at certain times of the day. If there's parking on the outside, on what we would consider to be overflow parking on the street, I was concerned about them, exiting, not being able to see until they're really, really close to University Avenue, and then, does that create a potential hazard?
I don't know if you can go back to the one that shows the aerial. Right now, there's a wide shoulder that would act as an acceleration lane. If it was needed, we could take parking off of there. We would work with UDOT to do that, to have an adequate acceleration lane. Really, those function as like right-in, right-outs. if somebody wanted to go south, they would probably go up to the signalized intersection if they were concerned, with making a left turn there. Out.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure UDOT's going to require that to be a right in, right out.
okay. Okay,
I was just going to say, we talked with UDOT on that, and basically their position is that any of the highway is not permissible to be parked in. But they don't enforce it unless there's complaints, and they don't paint it out red, and so we looked at that because it's a little unsightly to see all these cars parked out front. And so we provided enough parking that they don't need to do that. So we're kind of hoping that will, but if you look at Project South of us, it's just more convenient to get into those units by going across the lawn, so there's usually 7 or 8 cars under it.
Yeah.
They just don't enforce it, but it is illegal to park.
thank you.
You can see that on this aerial. You can see cars over accessing the commercial
Yeah.
area, cars out in front here for the housing units. Yeah, correct. UDOT leaves the parking enforcement up to the city, and we would have to put signs up to be able to enforce that, but currently that's not being done.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. Sir, you had a comment. You raised your hand.
I was just going to say, I've been aware in some of the discussions I've been in that UDOT is concerned about parking. They want to eliminate the parking all the way along that strip, and they're going to be in the future taking some steps in that regard. I just wanted to make sure that that was the case. And I think he mentioned that the stoplight is on the southern entrance. I believe it's on the northern.
On the northern, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I expected the members of the HOA to be here, and maybe they're here, but not having them come up, to me, whether they were not here at the time or whatnot, it was kind of heartening that things had actually worked out and for the benefit of both parties, and everything was agreed to and moved forward. So kudos to both parties for taking the extra time and coming out with a good resolution. So.
Right. Other questions or comments before we potentially make a motion or recommendation for the municipal council on this item? And because it's the one item, if there's any other comments that someone feels we need to hear, or before we make that motion, I'll obviously entertain that at this point, just to make sure everyone's voice is heard and adequately heard. Mr. Smith,
I'm ready to make a motion.
please.
I would motion that we recommend approval of the proposed project plan from JZW Architects, requesting the approval for the final phase of the arbors on the avenue located at 5072 North University Avenue. And this is an approval, isn't it? And
We are approving.
This isn't a recommendation to the
No, this is
council. This is
approval.
an approval.
This is approval, correct.
Okay, so I recommend approval, subject to meeting all the ordinances, development agreements, and CRC requirements, and include with my approval the findings of the staff report and staff recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, and it was seconded by Ms. Winden. Any discussion on the motion or its second? All those in favor of approval, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The item is approved.
I have one question for Brian. We do not need to come back for an additional approval on the parking out there as long as we meet the code, is that correct?
You want to address?
Yeah.
Oh.
If you,
That was that,
yeah, let me go to that.
Those extra spots.
do we want to make, well, we did approve it, so we probably should make a second motion.
That you can, I guess, delegate it to,
Yeah, so should we just, is that clear? So there's that little amenity structure, whatever else is within everything, so we could just make a recommendation to approve that be delegated to city staff?
Yeah.
Sounds like you just made a motion.
So,
Those would be covered garages up there and heated inside. And we've already met with the engineering department, and so far, we're able to meet all the setbacks from the road, and doesn't seem to be a problem with that. But we will be happy to work with engineering, making that a condition of the approval.
Mr. Day.
So we haven't seen any final engineering on any of that yet. So I would anticipate that we're going to be getting into some 30% slope issues. So until we see some more detail, we can't really address that. I don't know.
So you're proposing that we probably should see that as a separate item?
That would be my recommendation, because then you could address the parking and the 30% at the same time.
Yeah, we'd hear it as a minor project plan approval, I guess would be the key. I mean, we would have it as a project plan within our area, but instead of it having to come back here for just that portion, if, you've got the ability to delegate that to CRC approval
And to work with engineering and city
Right.
staff.
Yeah.
The responsibility of being able to deviate from that 30% resides with the planning commission. I guess they could delegate that. I don't know.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking the 30% area, I was just thinking the other approval, but, yeah.
Because they're gonna have to get down
The hill.
the hill, and there's about 50 feet of elevation, so.
Sir?
So I was going to just address, he would be correct if that was, we haven't been that clear because we haven't submitted anything besides that. There will no, it's totally flat. Everything that's shown there is flat. We're not going anywhere down the hill, nor do we plan to do anything on the hill. The access will be off North Canyon Road only, so you'll have to drive around if you're going to get to it. So we're not going to broach the hill at all. It was retained by the previous developer at a great expense to them, so we don't want to mess with it. We're just going to leave it alone, and what's shown up there is flat.
And then that would be worked out with city staff and with engineering.
So, I guess my question is, how do you park your car and get down to your unit?
It's pretty much overflow and be used for, say, recreational vehicles or something that you need, it's not going to be used every day.
It's like long-term. So there's no path?
Right. Okay.
Do we, yes,
We'll have
Mr.
we'll have that same issue. In this corner, we haven't seen any grading yet. They're probably going to be getting into 30% issues there also.
But they'll still have to work through engineering and city staff for all of that.
If we identify that, we may have to come back to you to get approval to exceed that.
Fair enough. Mr. McKinney?
No, that answered my question.
So are we willing to make a motion that the developer and engineering and city staff work within the purview of this approved item to work on that auxiliary structure? Or was that something that we would want to hear before us? I see one shaking of head no.
I'm in agreement with that, until and unless it hits the 30% issue that needs to come back to the planning commission. Otherwise, I'm
And the developer is
fantastic with,
fairly confident that
Yeah.
it won't, engineering, okay.
yep.
So would someone like to make that motion?
You said it so well.
I was going to say, how do we want to craft that?
So I would like to make a motion that JZW Architects be allowed to proceed with their auxiliary structure as proposed at the arbors on the avenue at 5072 University Avenue, to proceed with the development or project proposal plan for that structure and not be required to come back before the Provo City Planning Commission, so long as they're able to resolve all issues between city staff, engineering, and CRC requirements as stated by the city code.
Love it. Second.
Second, any discussion on that item or motion? Please do not ask me to restate that.
No.
Kermit seconded that motion.
That was really good.
All those in favor of approving that motion as stated, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Good night.